MAGA's misguided isolationists. The press is full of reporting on the MAGA civil war over Iran, but what's notable is that the loudest isolationists appear to be losing the debate. It's worth considering how they've misread the historical moment, the views of most Republicans, and above all, President Trump. So you understand that? Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, people like me, we don't understand Trump. We don't understand the views of most Republicans, and we've misread the historical moment. I will suggest all of that is false. Start with the threat and the mission. Like leftists after Vietnam, the new right isolationists see every U.S. military intervention as a slippery slope to disaster. That's because A, they are, and B, when they're premised on absolute falsehoods, why should we think they are anything else? It's not that we're anti-war. We're not pacifists. We're not leftists. In fact, we're battling against leftists. Neoconservatives and neoliberals are leftists. They are statists. They are collectivists. What else could they be? Instead of Vietnam syndrome, they suffer from Iraq syndrome. Every U.S. intervention will turn into a quagmire of nation building or even catastrophe. Okay, so you've already named two of those where that's happened. And you could also then name Afghanistan, right? Ukraine is something of a catastrophe. Which wars weren't catastrophes? And we're told World War I and World War II were not catastrophes. In fact, we won. And in some sense, from the regime's perspective, that is exactly right. They were able to get their proxy state in the Middle East so they could continue on with the rest of the Zionist project. That's what World War I was designed to do. The U.S. became involved in World War I because of the Balfour Declaration and because of the leverage that was put on by Zionists. Same thing with World War II. And the purpose was to create the proxy state of Israel, which they did in partnership with the Nazis. Okay? It's like, no, don't talk about the Nazis. Skipping down a bit. Wars are unpredictable and always come with risks, but that must be contemplated. But so far, Israel is winning this fight without regional, much less global escalation. And they're just saying Israel's winning this fight. The entire thing is nonsense. Iran has fired back at Israel with decreasing missiles by the day, while Russia and China steer clear. Military conflict is not a solution, Chinese President Xi Jinping said Tuesday. And that's just fine. Okay. So Russia and China are not getting involved, even though they have the back of Iran. Why aren't they doing that? Well, they must not be too concerned about what's happening so far. We also see video every day, and I don't trust any of this video. I don't trust any of the reporting, but in a narrative understanding of how things are going, to say that Israel is winning while we're also getting stories about how Israel is being bombed. There's this huge explosion today at Haifa, Beersheba, but they have all these targets in Israel. So apparently the Iron Dome isn't working. The very real Iron Dome isn't working. The isolationists are unwilling to make distinctions and treat each intervention on its own terms. In Iran's case, no one is talking about putting U.S. troops on the ground or a military occupation, and they should add yet. Nor is anyone asking the U.S. to do the heavy lifting or take the biggest risk. And I don't know how they're possibly saying that with a straight face. The U.S. is supposed to do the critical bombing run to take the big bunker buster. And they decided, by the way, that the bunker buster's not going to work. They're actually going to need a tactical nuclear strike to eliminate Fordo. So we are going to have to take our magical bomb, put it on our invisible plane, and then drop it on Iran's super secret underground lair where they are conjuring a similar magical bomb. That's the whole story. Top Gun run in, just like Top Gun Maverick, hitting this impossible target. You're only going to get one chance. You got to strike this thing. And if you don't do it, the whole world's going to end. That's where we are with this. And that would be the heavy lifting, and it would be the biggest risk, because otherwise the indication is that the heavy lifting has already been done by Israel. Well, that's not the case, because they have no way of finishing the job, which is why people like Steve Bannon keep taunting them by telling them to finish the job. This is the dirty work that Israel does for all of us, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said Tuesday. So the German Chancellor is suggesting that what Israel is doing is actually for everyone. And who does he mean by all of us? Well, that can't be everyone in the world, right? Because Iran has allies. Iran's not threatening China or Russia. They are just supposedly threatening Israel. They're not threatening Europe. They're not threatening the United States, although we're told that they chant death to America. It's reiterated here. And that's enough for us to feel threatened. The U.S. mission would be adding aerial firepower that Israel doesn't have, and that America has resisted selling it to destroy buried nuclear sites. The U.S. wouldn't be starting a war, but trying to finish it sooner by neutralizing a nuclear threat from a regime that chants death to America. That's all we need to know. They say magical bomb. They're going to get a magical bomb, and they don't like us. They say death to America. Therefore, we need to bomb the ever-loving shit out of them. Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini resisted Mr. Trump's terms on Wednesday and said any U.S. military intervention will undoubtedly cause irreparable harm to them. General Eric Kurilla, the top U.S. commander in the Middle East, told Congress on June 10th that Israel had weakened Iran. Really? On June 10th, he said that, huh? I thought they didn't strike Iran till the night of the 12th here, which was the 13th over there, Friday the 13th. There has rarely been a time with greater opportunity to protect national interests in the Middle East, but only if we have the courage. Mr. Carlson now labels Mr. Trump complicit and urges the U.S. to drop Israel, which seems to be Mr. Carlson's overriding priority, as it is for a great many of us, actually. Another podcaster calls for Mr. Trump's impeachment. Their fellow travelers warned that U.S. action would split the MAGA base, but in the real world, Trump supporters seem to be rallying behind the president. Yes, we're rallying behind the president. We're not rallying behind Israel, and we're not rallying behind Trump going into a war. Trump says different things about the situation. We still support Trump, but not that piece. So splitting the MAGA base, no. Splitting the MAGA base off from the Republican establishment, yes. And we're all about that. That's wonderful. Calling for Trump's impeachment is ridiculous. That is another podcaster. I don't know who that is, but that's obviously retarded. Is it a priority to drop Israel, to make it so that the United States no longer prioritizes defending Israel above all else? Yeah, that's a priority. And they would then say, well, you're basically then asking for Israel to be wiped off the map. Well, if a nation state can't defend itself without causing world wars, of which they've already caused two, and this one being the third, then maybe they shouldn't exist. Okay. I don't really have a dog in that fight. If Israel is still a state after all this is said and done, fine. Two-state solution, fine. But if they're not, that's fine too. Just like it's fine if Ukraine is no longer a state after this, or Taiwan is no longer a state after this, or Guyana is no longer a state after this. It's okay if they all are, as long as the people are there and supporting a sovereign country, as long as the people are on board with it. You know, it doesn't matter how the global regime's maps are drawn. You change the name of a country to something else, everything else stays the same, except for the system of governance, and the regime government is removed. That sounds like a win. Okay. So it's not that I want Israel gone, and it's certainly not got anything to do with normal Jews just practicing their faith, but the global regime has a proxy state on land that they took by force and manipulation. That doesn't have to just last there forever. And as far as the enduring biblical Israel, well, that's the Christian diaspora. So that's not going anywhere. It's just this global regime proxy state that assumed the name of Israel so that they could get credit for everything that the biblical Israel represents. And if you want to talk about just the land, well, there are other countries in that region that occupy the land of biblical Israel. Okay. I think Egypt has some of it, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria. Could any of them today change their name to Israel and then be counted as the biblical Israel, like the current proxy state of Israel is and does? I don't think so. I don't think anybody would take that seriously. Certainly nobody would be like, oh, well, now that Saudi Arabia has changed the name of part of their land to Israel, we have to defend that land at all costs. Whenever whoever's there tells us that we have to, along with all the world's bankers, the world's media, etc. It's such a preposterous and stupid notion. I can't believe that there are actually people making these arguments and being taken seriously for them. And then, of course, also getting incredibly offended if anybody ever challenges that viewpoint and that perspective, which is a ridiculous one. Let's close this out. Most Republicans like and support Israel from long cultural, democratic, and strategic affinity. You can certainly say that. They also understand the danger from a nuclear Iran. You can certainly say that too. A JL Partners survey who finds MAGA Republicans support U.S. strikes on Iran by more than 3-1. I have not seen polling that reflects that. I've seen polling that reflects the exact opposite. A poll by Gray House, again, who finds 83% of Trump voters support Israel's strike, and 73% say Iran can't be trusted to honor an agreement. Well, that doesn't mean we want the U.S. to bomb them, does it? A fair conclusion from the IAEA reports on 20 years of Iranian nuclear deception, lies, and cover-ups. And who knows whether or not any of that is true, like what the status of Iran's efforts toward a magical bomb have actually been. J.D. Vance, who has long courted MAGA's isolationists, explained in an X post Tuesday why Mr. Trump, quote, may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. And that, of course, is meaningless. He seems to know which way the White House wind is blowing. And they keep pushing this line that Trump is going to do this. Sooner or later, he's going to do this. And they have to create that reality. And they have to talk that reality into existence so that people in MAGA will say, well, Trump's going to be doing this, so I guess we better find a way to support it, rather than what we should be doing, which is saying repeatedly in every possible venue, no. We are not defending Israel. We are not going to bomb Iran. We're not starting a war with one of the superpower militaries in the world who just happen to be backed by China and Russia. No, we're not doing that. Okay. That's the only message that needs to go out, which is why the media wants us to understand Trump's actually going to do this. So if you're going to stay on board with Trump, well, you got to be on board with that. And that's the tactic to split the MAGA base. Mr. Trump sees himself as peacemaker, but that is no contradiction with wanting to deny a nuclear bomb to a theocratic Iranian regime. On that point, he has been consistent since before he entered politics. The inconsistencies lie with the isolationists, so traumatized by Iraq and Afghanistan, that they would let a revolutionary regime go nuclear in the name of peace. I am not convinced, and this is going to be one of those statements that makes people mad. It's all good. I'm not convinced any longer that Iran is the threat that they make it out to be. Not even a little bit, okay? Because the people who describe Iran as that threat are the very same people who have lied about absolutely all of the rest of it, including our elections, okay? The Wall Street Journal editorial board cannot be trusted on anything. Neither can the rest of the mainstream media. Neither can the neocons and the neoliberals. Neither can the foreign policy establishment. And neither can the TV generals. None of these people can be trusted on the identification of our enemies, okay? And even if they could be, we would not have to agree with them because we have no rationale as to why we should. We just keep hearing that they chant death to America. Oh, they violate women's rights. Can't you see the women out there protesting because of the haircuts or whatever? Yeah, that's color revolution. Okay. They wage color revolutions. There's a color revolution right now against Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a color revolution against Donald Trump. There's a color revolution in Iran. There are color revolution tactics used in Russia. That's what Alexei Navalny was there for. And if you're not familiar with that story, I did 3 episodes in a row, like exclusively on Alexei Navalny, because it is such a clear model for how they attempt to overthrow regimes, create shadow governments, try to convince the rest of the world that the shadow government is legitimate, and then continue moving forward. They've already got the person to replace the Ayatollah with, which is the son of the Shah who was deposed in 1979. And that guy's lived in America for like the last 4 decades. Why? Probably because he was brought over here by the regime and given a nice, safe, very comfortable life in America. Now he's going to go back and run Iran. And we're just supposed to believe that that's what the Iranian people really want. All of it premised on the very, very badness of the Ayatollah and the Iranian regime. You got to make them prove it harder than that. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe them at all. And I don't need to be an expert on Iran to understand that. Okay. It is simple, deductive logic based on first principles. If you stick to first principles, we don't know anything about that regime in Iran. Okay. We do know that the people who have identified that regime as a pariah state and one of our greatest enemies are the same people who lie about everything else. They did the same thing with Putin, with Kim Jong-un, we'll see with Xi. They do the same thing with people like Bolsonaro and Viktor Orban. They did the same thing with Mohammed bin Salman. Remember when they tried to say Mohammed bin Salman ordered Jamal Khashoggi to be captured and then chopped up into little pieces? These people are insane, okay? They love war to the extent that the regime controls virtually all mainstream media, and they do. Then who is speaking through these people? Well, it's that global regime with their most critical proxy state, the centerpiece of their project, potentially being diminished, not only in a real legal formal sense, but also in the eyes of the world, in the narrative generally, so that people actually are no longer thinking, oh, well, yeah, of course we have to protect Israel because of our religious beliefs or because they're our greatest ally or all this other bullshit. Like they're good relative to Iran. Iran's very bad. So what we need is a democracy in the Middle East to protect us from the Iranian threat that would definitely reach our shores. If it weren't for Israel, what? These people are insane. Don't believe them about anything. And when you see an argument made like that one that requires them to be telling the truth about the Iranian regime, who they are and what they represent, well, since you can't establish that, the rest of the argument immediately collapses, right? Think about it as like a Jenga tower, okay? And you've got this argument. They need you to get to the top level, which is we have to send our magical bomb on a Top Gun Maverick mission into Iran so they can drop that magical bomb on Iran's super secret underground lair where they are conjuring their own magical bomb, and assuming everything goes perfectly, their magical bomb will not come into existence. That's the top of the Jenga tower, okay? And at the very bottom of the Jenga tower is Iran is a brutal, evil regime who's mean to women and chants death to America. And as soon as you're like, really? And you pull out one, it's like, it just gives that little wobble. It's not really falling over. And then you see the block that represents Iran is about to get a nuclear bomb, as they have been for the last 30 years. Well, you pull that out, wobble, wobble. You don't have a whole lot more wobbling you can do before the entire tower falls down. Nothing else has strengthened it. They need you to get all the way up to that top level, and the entire thing collapses when you just go back to first principles and you're honest about the things we do and don't know, and about the sources of our information that, may well have formed beliefs and convictions in us due to a brainwashing. Okay. Like, it doesn't matter how hard you believe it. It really doesn't. And I've had to go through this process with myself on every single issue. So I understand that it's not something that's comfortable and that people don't want to do it. And that, we all believe that we've done enough work on this subject. We're certain that that's right. Yes, I understand that your macro pattern and your first principles mean that this is wrong, but I've done the work. I've paid attention to this for 3 decades while you were just a teenager or some bullshit. And therefore, the truth about Iran. Okay, give me a break. Speaking of, by the way, the claims, 30 years worth of claims about the Iranian bomb. Check this out.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year. It could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
That last clip was from 1995. The one before that was 1996. The one before that was 2006. Then I think we had 2009 in there, 2015, 2018, and then what he said last Wednesday or Thursday. So 30 years of claims that Iran is about to conjure up their magical bomb, and still they haven't conjured one up. Or maybe they've conjured up so many and they've just kept them a secret. But if that's true, then they're actually not trying to wipe out Israel with a magical bomb. And therefore, we don't need to worry about them having a magical bomb. Okay. So the arguments are non-existent. There is no foundation to any of this. Okay. So the claim, just to be clear, because we talk about these things a bunch, the claim is not that every single piece, every single thing they say is false. It's that the foundational claims are clearly false or unsubstantiated. And therefore, anything that rests on those claims can just be discarded at that point. It doesn't matter whether it's true or false up there. We don't have to go through and prove that all of those other aspects are fake. The foundations on which they rest are non-existent. You cannot found rational arguments on those premises. And therefore, the whole thing is gone. Okay. It's just immediately invalid at that point. That is basic logic.